Chapter 24. Arthas did not know how long they spent beneath the frozen surface of Northrend in the ancient and deadly Nerubian kingdom. He only knew two things as he trudged out into the light, blinking like a bat forced out into the sun. One was that he hoped he was in time to defend the Lich King. The other was that he was grateful, bone deep, to be out of that place. It had been clear that the Nerubian kingdom had once been beautiful. Arthas was not sure what he had expected, but it had not been the haunting, vivid colors of blue and purple, nor the intricate geometric shapes that denoted different rooms and corridors. These still retained their beauty, but were like a preserved rose, something that, while still lovely, was nonetheless dead. A strange smell wafted through the place as they walked. Arthas could not place it, nor even categorize it. It was acrid and stale at once, but not unpleasant, not to one used to the company of the decaying dead. It was likely the end of a shorter route, as Anubarak had promised, but every step had been bought with blood. Soon after they had entered, they had come under attack. They scuttled out from the darkness, a dozen or more spider beings shittering angry as they descended. Anubarak and his soldiers met them head-on. Arthas had hesitated for a fraction of a second, then joined in, ordering his troops to do the same. The vast caverns were filled with the shrieking and shittering of the Nerubians, the guttural groans of the undead, and the agonized cries of the living necromancers as the Nerubians attacked with goblets of poison. Thick, sticky webbing trapped several of the fiercer corpses, holding them helpless until snapping mandibles lopped off heads, or stiletto-sharp legs impaled and eviscerated them. Anubarak was a nightmare incarnate. He uttered a dreadful, hollow sound in his guttural native language, and fell upon his former subjects with devastating consequences. His legs, each working separately, grabbed and impaled his hapless victims. Vicious pincers sheared off limbs, and the whole time, the stale air was filled with cries that made Arthas, inured to such things as he was, shiver and swallow hard. The skirmish was violent and costly, but the Nerubians eventually retreated to the shadows that had birthed them. Several of their number were left behind, 8 legs squirming violently before the hapless Arcanids curled up on themselves and died. "What was that all about?" Arthas had asked, panting and whirling on Anubarak. "These Nerubians are your kin. Why are they hostile to us?"
"Many of us who fell during the War of the Spider were brought back to serve the Lich King," Anubarak had replied. "These warriors, however," and he waved a foreleg at one of the bodies, "never died. Foolishly, they still fight to liberate Nerub from the Scourge."
Arthas glanced down at the dead Nerubian. "Foolishly indeed," he murmured, and lifted a hand. "In death, they only served that which they struggled against in life." And so it was that when they finally emerged into the dim light of the overhead world, gulping in the cold, clean air, his army had swollen with new recruits, freshly dead and utterly to his command. Arthas drew Invincible to a halt. He was trembling, badly, and wanted to simply sit and breathe fresh air for a few moments. The air quickly soured with the rotting stench of his own army. Anubarak passed him, pausing to gaze at him complacently for a moment.
"No time to rest, Death Knight. The Lich King has need of us. We must serve."
Arthas shot the Crypt Lord a quick glance. Something in the tone of the being's voice spoke of the vaguest stirring of, was it resentment? Did Anubarak serve only because he had to? Would he turn on the Lich King if he was able to do so? And more to the point, would he turn on Arthas? The Lich King's powers were weakening, and so were Arthas's power right along with him. If they got weak enough... The Death Knight watched the retreating figure of the Crypt Lord, took a deep breath, and followed. How long the trek through thick snow and scouring winds was, Arthas didn't know. At one point he nearly lost consciousness while riding, so weak was he. He came to with a start, terrified at the lapse, forcing himself to hang on. He could not falter. Not now. They crested a hill, and Arthas at last saw the glacier in the middle of the valley, and the army that awaited him. His spirits lifted at the sight of so many assembled to fight for him and the Lich King. Anubarak had left many of his own warriors behind, and they were there, stoic and ready. Farther down though, closer to the glacier, he saw other figures milling about. He was too far away to distinguish them, but he knew whom they must be. His gaze traveled upward, and his breath caught. The Lich King was there, deep inside the glacier, trapped in his prison. Arthas had seen him so in the visions. He listened with half an ear, as one of the Nerubians hastened up to Anubarak and Arthas to brief them on the situation.
"You've just arrived in time. Illidan's forces have taken up position at the base of the glacier and..."
Arthas cried out as the worst pain he had yet tasted buffeted him. Again, his world turned the color of blood as agony racked his body. So close to the Lich King now, the torment he shared with the great entity was magnified 100-fold. "Arthas, my champion, you have come at last." "Master," Arthas whispered, his eyes squeezed shut and his fingers pressed into his temples. "Yes, I have come. I am here." "There is a fracture in my prison, the frozen throne, and my energies are seeping from it," the Lich King continued. "That is why our powers have diminished." "But how?" Had someone attacked him? Arthas saw no immediate foes in his vision. Surely he was not too late. "The rune blade, Frostmourne, was once locked inside the throne as well. I thrust it from the eye so that it would find its way to you, and then lead you to me." "And so it has," Arthas breathed. The Lich King was immobilized, trapped inside the ice. It must have been through sheer will that he had been able to force a great sword through the ice and send it to Arthas. Now he recalled the ice that had held Frostmourne, how it looked jagged, as if it had been broken off a larger piece. Such vast power, and all bent toward bringing Arthas to this place. Step by step, Arthas had been led here, directed, controlled. "You must make haste, my champion. My creator, the demon lord Kil'jaeden, sent his agents here to destroy me. If they should reach the frozen throne before you, all will be lost. The scourge will be undone. Now hurry! I will grant you all the power I can spare." Coldness suddenly began to seep through Arthas, numbing the angry, raw pain, calming his thoughts. The energy was so vast, so heady, it was more powerful even than what Arthas had known before. This, then, was why he had come, to drink deep of this icy draught, to take the cold strength of the Lich King into himself. He opened his eyes, and his vision was clear. Frostmourne's runes blazed to new life, a chill mist seeping up from it. Grinning fiercely, Arthas gripped the blade and lifted it high. When he spoke, his voice was clear and resonant, and carried in the crisp, frigid air. "I saw another vision from the Lich King. He has restored my powers. I know what I must do." He pointed with Frostmourne at the doll-sized figures in the distance. "Illidan has mocked the Scourge long enough. He is attempting to gain entry to the Lich King's throne chamber. He will fail. It's time we put the fear of death back in him. Time to end the game once and for all." With a fierce, challenging cry, he swung Frostmourne over his head. It sang out, hungry for more souls. "For the Lich King!" Arthas cried, and charged down to meet his enemies. It felt like a god as he swung Frostmourne with almost careless ease. Each soul it took only strengthened him. Let the arrows of the Blood Elves shower upon them like the snow. They fell like wheat before the scythe. At one point, Arthas glanced over the battlefield. Where was the one he had to slay? He saw no sign of Illidan yet. Was it possible he had already gained entrance into the... "Arthas!"
Arthas, turn and fight me, damn you!
The voice was clear and pure of full hatred, and Arthas turned. The elven prince was but a few yards away, his red and gold bright as blood against the unforgiving whiteness of the snow upon which they fought. He was tall and proud, his staff planted in the snow before him, his eyes fixed on Arthas. Magic crackled around him.
You will go no further, butcher!
A muscle twitched near Arthas's eye. Sol Sylvanas had called him too. He made a slight sking sound and grinned at the elf who had once seemed so very powerful and learned to a young human prince. His mind went back to the moment when Cale had surprised Arthas and Jaina in a kiss. The boy that Arthas had been then had known himself outmatched by the older, much more powerful mage. Arthas was no longer a boy.
After you disappeared in so cowardly a fashion at our last confrontation, I admit I am surprised to see you show your face again, Cale. Don't be upset that I stole Jaina from you. You should let that go and move on. After all, there is so much left in this world for you to enjoy. Oh wait, no, there isn't. Damn you to hell, Arthas Menethil! Kael'thas snarled, trembling with outrage. You've taken everything I've ever cared for. Vengeance is all I have left. He wasted no more time in venting his anger, but instead lifted the staff. The crystal affixed to its tip glowed brightly, and a ball of fire crackled in his free hand. A heartbeat later, it had soared toward Arthas. Shards of ice rained down upon the Death Knight. Kael'thas was a master mage, and much faster than anyone Arthas had ever encountered. He barely got Frostmourne up in time to deflect the surging fiery globe. The frost shards, however, were ease itself. He swung the great rune blade over his head, and it called to its blade the shards of ice like iron shavings to a magnet. Grinning, Arthas whirled the sword over his head, directed the pieces of ice back to their sender. He'd been taken by surprise by Kael'thas' speed, but he would not make that mistake again. You might want to think twice about attacking me with ice, Cale, he said, laughing. He needed to goad the mage into acting rashly. Control was key to the manipulation of magic, and if Cale lost his temper, he would undoubtedly lose the fight. Cale narrowed his eyes. Thanks for the advice, he growled. Arthas tightened up on the reins, preparing to ride down his adversary. But at that instant the snow beneath him glowed bright orange for a moment, and then became water. Invincible suddenly dropped 2 feet, and his hooves slipped on the slick ground. Arthas leaped off and sent the beast cantering away, gripping Frostmourne with renowned determination in his right hand. He extended his left. A dark ball of whirling green energy formed in his flattened palm and sped toward Cale like an arrow shot from a bow. The mage moved to counter, but the attack was too swift. His face went a shade paler, and he stumbled back, his hand going to his heart. Arthas grinned as some of the mage's life energy flooded him. I took your woman, he said, continuing to try to anger the mage, although he knew, and probably Cale knew, that Jaina had never belonged to the elf. I held her in my arms at night. She tasted sweet when I kissed her, Cale. She loathes you now, Kael'thas replied. You sicken and disgust her, Arthas. Anything she felt for you has since turned to hatred. Arthas' chest contracted oddly. He realized he had not thought about how Jaina regarded him now. He had always done his best to thrust all thoughts of her away when they drifted into his mind. Was it true? Did Jaina really? An enormous crackling ball of fire exploded against his chest, and Arthas cried out as he was forced backward by the blow. Flame licked at him for precious seconds before he recovered his wits sufficiently to counter the spell. The armor had largely protected him, although its heat against his skin was agonizing, but he was aghast that he had been so taken by surprise. A second ball of fire came, but this time he was ready, meeting the fiery blast with his own deadly eyes. I destroyed your homeland, fouled your precious Sunwell, and I killed your father. Frostmourne sucked the soul right out of him, Cale.
It's gone forever. You're good at killing noble, elderly men, sneered Kel'Thas. The jab was unexpectedly painful. At least you faced my father on the battlefield. What of your own, Arthas Menethil? How brave of you to cut down a defenseless parent opening his arms to embrace his... Arthas charged, closing the distance between them in a few strides, and brought Frostmourne down. Kel'Thas parried with his staff. For a second, the staff held. Then it broke beneath Frostmourne's onslaught. But the delay had bought Kael sufficient time to unsheath a glittering, gleaming weapon. A rune blade that seemed to glow red in contrast to Frostmourne's cold, icy blue. The blades clashed. Both men pressed down, straining with effort, each one's blade holding off the other as the seconds ticked by. Kel'Thas grinned as their eyes met. You recognize this blade, don't you? Arthas did. He knew the sword's name and its lineage. Flame Strike. Fellow Milorn, once wielded by Kel'Thas' ancestor, Dothramar Sunstrider, the founder of the dynasty. The sword was almost unspeakably old. It had seen the War of the Ancients, the birth of the Highborn. Arthas returned the smirk. Flamestrike would have another significant event to bear witness to. It would now see the end of the last Sunstrider. Oh, I do. I saw it snap in two beneath Frostmourne an instant before I slew your father. Arthas was physically stronger, and the energy of the Lich King surged through him. With a rag grunt, he shoved Kel'Thas backward, thinking to knocking off balance. The mage recovered quickly and almost danced into another position, brandishing fellow Milorn, his eyes never leaving Arthas. And so I found it, and I had it reforged. Broken swords are weak where they are mended, elf. Arthas began to circle, watching for the instant where Kael would be vulnerable. Kel'Thas laughed. Human swords, perhaps, not elven. Not when they are reforged with magic and hatred and a burning need for revenge. No, Arthas, fellow Milorn is stronger than ever, as I am, as are the Sindarai. We are the stronger for having been broken, stronger and filled with purpose, and that purpose is to see you fall. The attack came suddenly. One moment Kael was standing, ranting, and the next Arthas was fighting for his very life. Frostmourne clanged against Flamestrike, and damned if the elf wasn't right. The blade held. Arthas darted back, feinted, and then brought Frostmourne across in a mighty sweep. Kael lunged out of his path and whirled to counterattack with a violence and intensity that surprised Arthas. He was forced back, one step, then two, and then suddenly he slipped and fell. Snarling, Kael lunged in, thinking to deal the death blow. But Arthas remembered training with Muradin long ago, and the dwarf's favorite trick suddenly filled his mind. He pulled his leg in tightly and kicked Kel'Thas with all his strength. The mage let out a grunt and was hurtled backward into the snow. Gasping, the Death Knight flipped to his feet, hefted Frostmourne with both hands, and plunged it down. Somehow Flamestrike was there. The blades again strained against each other. Kel'Thas' eyes burned with hatred. But Arthas was the stronger in armed combat, stronger with a stronger sword, despite Kel'Thas' gloating about how fellow Milorn was reforged. Slowly, inexorably, as Arthas knew must happen, Frostmourne descended toward Kel'Thas' bare throat.
She hates you,
Kael whispered. Arthas cried out, fury blurring his vision for a moment, and shoved down with all his strength into the snow and frozen earth. Kel'Thas was gone.
Coward!
Arthas cried, although he knew the prince would not hear him. The bastard had again teleported away at the last second. Fury raged in him, threatening to cloud his judgment, and he pushed it aside. He had been foolish to let Kel'Thas rile him so. Curse you, Jaina! Even now you haunt me! Invincible! To me! He cried, and realized his voice was shaking. Kael'thas was not dead, but he was out of the way, and that was all that mattered. He wheeled the head of his skeletal horse around and charged again toward the fray and the throne chamber of his master. He moved through the milling crowd of enemies as if there were so many insects. As they fell, he reanimated them and sent them against their fellows. The tide of the undead was unstoppable and implacable. The snow around the base of the spire was churned up and drenched with blood. Arthas looked about him, at the last few knots of fighting going on. Blood elves, but no sign of their master. Where was Illidan? A flurry of quick motion caught his eye, and he turned. He growled beneath his breath. Another dreadlord. This one's back was toward him, black wings outstretched, cloven hooves melting the very snow. Arthas lifted Frostmourne. "I've defeated your kind before, dreadlord," he snarled. "Turn and face me if you dare, or flee into the nether like the coward you demons are." The figure turned slowly. Massive horns crowned its head. His lips curved back in a smile, and over its eyes was a ragged black blindfold. Two green, glowing spots appeared where the eyes should have been. "Hello, Arthas." Deep and sinister, the voice had changed, but not as much as the colorized body. It was still the same pale lavender hue, etched with the same tattoos and scarifications. But the legs, the wings, the horns. Arthas immediately understood what must have happened. So that was why Illidan had become so powerful. "You look different, Illidan. I guess the skull of Gul'dan didn't agree with you." Illidan threw back his horned head. Dark, rich laughter rumbled from him. "On the contrary, I have never felt better. In a way, I suppose I should thank you for my present state, Arthas." "Show your appreciation by stepping out of the way, then." Arthas' voice was suddenly cold, and there was no trace of humor in it. "The frozen throne is mine, demon. Step aside. Leave this world and never return. If you do, I'll be waiting. We both have our masters, boy. Mine demands the destruction of the frozen throne. It would seem we are at odds," Illidan replied, and lifted the weapon Arthas had fought once before. His powerful hands with their sharp black nails closed on the weapon's center, and he whirled it with grace and deceptive casualness. Arthas knew a ripple of uncertainty at the display. He had just finished a fight with Kael'thas, and while he would have been the victor had not the elf, coward as he was, teleported out at the last instant, he had been taxed by the battle. There was no hint of wariness in Illidan's bearing. Illidan's smile grew as he noticed his enemy's discomfiture. He allowed himself a moment more of uncannily masterful handling the unusual demonic weapon, then struck a position, settling in, preparing for comeback. "It must be done! Your troops are either in pieces or part of my army." Arthas drew Frostmourne. His runes glowed brightly, and mist curled up from its hilt. Behind the blindfold, Illidan's eyes, much brighter and more intensely green than he remembered, narrowed at the sight of the runeblade. If the demonically changed Kel'Dorai had a powerful weapon, so too did Arthas. "You'll end up one or the other." "Doubtful," Illidan sneered. "I'm stronger than you now, and my master created yours. Come, pawn. I'll dispatch the servant before I dispatch you, pathetic." Arthas charged. Frostmourne glowed and hummed in his hands, as eager for Illidan's death as he was. The elf did not seem at all startled by the sudden rush, and with the utmost ease lifted his double-bladed weapon to parry. Frostmourne had broken ancient and powerful swords before, but this time it simply clanged and grated against the glowing green metal. Illidan gave him a smirk as he held his ground. Arthas again felt unease flicker through him. Illidan was indeed changed by absorbing the power of the skull of Gul'dan. For one thing, he was physically much stronger than he had been. Illidan chuckled, a deep and ugly sound, then shoved forcefully. It was Arthas who was forced to fall back, dropping to one knee to defend himself as the demon bore down on him. "It is we to turn the table thus," Illidan growled. "I might just kill you quickly, Death Knight, if you give me a good fight." Arthas didn't waste breath on insults. He gritted his teeth and concentrated on battling back the blows that were being rained upon him. The weapon was a swirl of glowing green. He could feel the power of demonic energy radiating from it, just as he knew that Illidan could sense Frostmourn's grim darkness. Suddenly, Illidan was not there, and Arthas lurched forward, his momentum taking him off balance. He heard a flapping sound and whirled to see Illidan overhead, his great, leathery wings creating a strong wind as he hovered out of reach. They eyed each other, Arthas catching his breath. He could see Illidan was not unaffected by the battle either. Sweat gleamed on the massive, lavender-hued torso. Arthas settled himself, Frostmourne at the ready for when Illidan would swoop in for a renewed assault. Then, Illidan did something utterly unexpected. He laughed, shifted the weapon in his hands, and in a flurry of motion seemingly snapped it into two. Each powerful hand now held a single blade. "Behold the twin blades of Azinoth!" Illidan gloated. He flew up higher, whirling the blades in his left and right hands, and Arthas realized that he favored neither one. Two magnificent warglaives that can be wielded as a single devastating weapon, or, as you see, as two. It was a favored weapon of a Doomguard, a powerful demon captain whom I slew 10,000 years ago. How long have you fought with your pretty blade, human? How well do you know it? The words were intended to unsettle the Death Knight. Instead, they invigorated him. Illidan might have had this admittedly powerful weapon for longer, but Frostmourne was bound to Arthas, and he to it. It was not a sword as much as an extension of himself. He had known it when he first had a vision of it, when he had just arrived in Northrend. He had been certain of the connection when he had laid eyes upon it, waiting for him, and now he felt it surge in his hand, confirming their unity. The demon blades gleamed. Illidan dropped down on Arthas like a stone. Arthas cried out and countered, more certain of this blow than of any he had dealt with the runeblade before, swinging Frostmourne up underneath the descending demon, and as he knew must happen, he felt the sword bite deep into flesh. He pulled, drawing the gash across Illidan's torso, and he felt a deep satisfaction as the former Kelderai screamed in agony. And yet the bastard would not fall. Illidan's wings beat erratically, still somehow keeping him aloft. And then before Arthas' shocked gaze, his body seemed to shift and darken, almost as if it was made of writhing black, purple, and green smoke. "This is what you have given me," Illidan cried. His voice, bass to begin with, had somehow grown even deeper. Arthas felt it shiver along his bones. The demon's eyes glowed fiercely in the swirling darkness that was his face. "This gift, this power, and it will destroy you." A scream was torn from Arthas' throat, and he fell again to his knees. Blazing green fire chased itself along his armor, seared his flesh, even dulled Frostmourne's blue glow for a moment. Over the raw cry of his own torment he heard Illidan laughing. Again, the fell fire cascaded over him, and Arthas fell forward, gasping. But as the fire faded, and he saw Illidan swooping in for the kill, he felt the ancient runeblade he still managed to grasp urge him to rally. Frostmourne was his, and he its, and so united, they were invincible. Just as Illidan lifted his blades for the kill, Arthas raised Frostmourne, thrusting upward with all his strength. He felt the blade connect, pierce flesh, strike deep. Illidan fell hard to the ground. Blood gushed from his bare torso, melting the snow around it with a slow hissing sound. His chest rose and fell in gasps. His vaunted twin blades were of no use now. One had been knocked from his grasp. The other lay in a hand that could not even curl around its hilt. Arthas got to his feet, his body still tingling with the remnants of the felfire Illidan had hurled at him. He stared at him for a long moment, branding the sight into his mind. He thought about dealing the killing blow, but decided to let the merciless cold of the place do it for him. A greater need burned in him now, and he turned, lifting his eyes to the spire that towered above him. He swallowed hard and simply stood for a moment, knowing, without knowing how he knew it, that something was about to fundamentally change. Then he took a deep breath and entered the cavern. Arthas moved almost as in a daze, down the lengths of twinning tunnels that led ever deeper into the bowels of the earth. His feet seemed guided, and while there was no noise, certainly no one to challenge his right to be there, he felt, rather than heard, a deep thrum of power. He continued to descend, feeling that call of power drawing him ever closer to his destiny. Up ahead was a cold, blue-white light. Arthas moved toward it, almost breaking into a run, and the tunnel opened up into what Arthas could only think of as a throne chamber. For just ahead was a structure that made Arthas's breath catch in his throat. The Lich King's prison sat atop of a twisting tower, this spire of blue-green, shimmering eyes that was not eyes, that rose up as if to pierce the very roof of the cavern. A narrow walkway wound, serpentine, about the spire, leading him upward. Still filled with the energy granted to him by the Lich King, Arthas did not tire. But unwelcome memories seemed to dart at him like flies as he ascended, putting one booted foot in front of the other. Words, phrases, images came back to him. Remember, Arthas, we are paladins. Vengeance cannot be part of what we must do. If we allow our passions to turn to bloodlust, then we will become as vile as the orcs. Jaina, no one can seem to deny you anything, least of me. Don't deny me, Jaina. Don't ever deny me, please. I never would, Arthas. Never. He kept going, relentlessly moving upward. We know so little. We can't just slaughter them like animals out of our own fear. This is bad business, lad. Leave it to me. Let it stay here, lost and forgotten. We'll find another way to save your people. Let's leave now. Go back and find that way. One foot followed the other, upward, ever upward. An image of black wings brushed his memory. I will leave you one final prediction. Just remember, the harder you strive to slay your enemies, the faster you'll deliver your people into their hands. Even as these memories tugged at him, clutched at his heart, there was one image, one voice that was stronger and more compelling than all the others, whispering, encouraging him. Closer you draw, my champion. My moment of freedom comes, and with it, your ascension to true power. Upward he climbed, his gaze ever on the peak, on the huge chunk of deep blue eyes that imprisoned the one who had first set Arthas' feet on this path. Closer it drew, until Arthas came to a halt a few feet away. For a long moment, he regarded the figure trapped within, imperfectly glimpsed. Mist rolled off the huge chunk of ice, further obscuring the image. Frostmourne glowed in his hand. From deep within, Arthas saw the barest hint of an answering flare of 2 points of glowing blue light. Return the blade, came the deep, rasping voice in Arthas' mind, almost unbearably loud. Complete the circle. Release me from this prison. Arthas took a step forward, then another. lifting Frostmourne as he moved until he was running. This was the moment it all had been leading to, and without realizing it, a roar built in his throat, and tore free as he swung the blade down with all of his strength. A massive cracking resounded through the chamber as Frostmourne slammed down. The ice shattered, huge chunks flying in every direction. Arthas lifted his arms to shield himself, but the shards flew past him harmlessly. Pieces fell into the imprisoned body, and the Lich King cried out, lifting his armored arms to the sky. More groaning, cracking sounds came from the cavern and from the being himself, so loud that Arthas winced and covered his ears. It was as if the very world was tearing itself apart. Suddenly the armored figure that was the Lich King seemed to shatter as his prison did, falling apart before Arthas' stunning gaze. There was nothing, no one inside. Only the armor, icy black, clattering to lie in pieces. The helm, empty of its owner's head, slid to a hole to lie at Arthas' feet. He stared down at it for a long moment. A deep shiver passed through him. All this time, he had been chasing a ghost. Had the Lich King ever really been there? If not, who had thrust Frostmourne from the ice? Who had demanded to be freed? Was he, Arthas Menethil, supposed to have been the one encased in the frozen throne all along? Had this ghost he had been chasing been himself? Questions that would likely never have answers, but one thing was clear to him. As Frostmourne had been for him, so was the armor. Gauntlet fingers closed over the piked helm, and he lifted it slowly, reverently, and then, closing his eyes, he lowered it onto his white head. He was suddenly galvanized, his body tensing as he felt the essence of the Lich King entering him. It pierced his heart, stopped his breath, shivered along his veins, icy, powerful, crashing through him like a tidal wave. His eyes were closed, but he saw so much. All that Ner'zhul, the orc shaman, had known, all he had seen, had done. For a moment, Arthas feared he would be overwhelmed by it all. That in the end, the Lich King had tricked him into coming here so that he could place his essence in a fresh new body. He braced himself for a battle for control, with his body as the prize. But there was no struggle, only a blending, a melding, all around him. The cavern continued to collapse. Arthas was only barely aware of it. His eyes darted rapidly back and forth beneath his closed lids. His lips moved. He spoke. They spoke. "Now we are one."